this point in time, Mr. Mukesh Aghi, President and CEO of US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, joins us on the show. Mukesh, appreciate you joining us. What is your reaction to Donald Trump being elected as the President of the United States for a second time?
Well, the landslide across the board, both in the White House and also in the Senate, and probably in the House and popular vote, was a surprise to everybody. We did have some kind of expectation that Donald Trump could win, but didn't expect such a major landslides. Now, the impact of that is that if he also gets the White House, then he has control over the trifecta and plus the Supreme Court. So that means he can push in a very aggressive reform agenda, which the country needs at the moment, both from an economic perspective, immigration perspective, and government bureaucracy perspective.
Absolutely. How do you think India-US ties will take shape under Donald Trump?
Well, you have to understand, you have a president who is more focused on America first. And on geopolitical side, I think he has some kind of what I call a deficit trust with China. In his last administration, China had promised that they will procure $200 billion worth of US goods to deal with the balance of payment. And that China did not honor that, so he has long memory about that. So he will push in aggressively on tariffs, while he will push in 20% tariffs on all the countries with China. He's committing to push in almost 60%. So that's going to be globally disruptive. It is going to put pressure on India how to manage those 20% export of tariff. But at the same time, it's going to push a lot of US companies to look at coming back, bringing their manufacturing back to US, or look at countries like India as an alternative site. So I think you will see disruption and slight upheaval in the first 6 months before things start settling down.
Do you think that Trump and Modi's strong relationship will help take India-US ties, to greater heights and to the next level, from defense to technology, some of the key sectors where there is potential for India and the US to grow under Prime Minister Modi and President Trump?
Well, the relationship between the Prime Minister Modi and President Trump is very good. There's a bonhomie between the two leaders, and you have to understand bonhomie only works effectively if geopolitically two countries are aligned. And in the case of India-US, both countries are aligned geopolitically, economically, technologically, and then people to people. And what we see is that the stress point of China is going to create a lot of pressure on Trump to leverage India. In fact, he's the one who pushed the Quad to become led by the head of states itself. So I think you will see a lot of engagement on the Quad side. Within the Quad, you will see a lot of activities taking place. And one of the proposals we have to the Trump administration is, why don't you make Quad an economic partnership also? Because when you look at the 4 countries who are a member of the Quad, Japan, Australia, US, and India, the combined GDP is around $35 trillion. And US has a FTA with Japan and also with Australia, but not with India. India has a FTA with Japan and some kind of a FTA with Australia. So if you can basically come up with the economic agenda and make this as a common market, so geopolitically countries are aligned, and economically also these countries are aligned. So from that perspective, you'll see a tremendous momentum. And as far as what sectors, you will see basically while they're trying to fix the immigration domestically, one of the challenges US has is skilled resources. Or when you try to push bringing in high-end manufacturing back to the US, where do you get those skills? And India becomes one of the potential countries provide those skills itself. So I think you will see a lot of engagement happening between the two countries in this area, definitely on the education front. You will see a lot of energy partnership taking place between the two countries, and definitely the technology partnership. We see a lot of manufacturing, especially on the defense side, moving into India because I think US needs to get its industrial base moving forward, and if you can't get it here, then partner with India also. So I believe you will see a much more activities taking place between the two countries because we are geopolitically aligned, and that's where the momentum starts.
And Mukesh, what role will the USISPF in working with the Trump government for a more cohesive US trade India ties will play?
Well, we basically work on both sides of the government itself, making sure that the policies are providing level playing field. There's a sense of transparency, and so companies from India into the U.S. and companies from U.S. into India are able to get better market access, are able to create more jobs, are able to basically do technology transfer itself. So I think that process for us continues. In fact, with the new administration, it becomes a challenging part because you have to educate the newcomer, the new bureaucracy itself, and new political leadership. So our role becomes much more active to make sure that we're communicating the right message to both sides of the aisle.
Do you think Trump's higher tariffs policy is going to impact Indian exports to the US? Is that a concern?
No, absolutely. When you basically put a 20% tariff on Indian goods coming into the US, the consumer will be conscious of not paying extra 20% because the tariffs are passed to the consumer. So I think that's where the government to government have to have a discussion. How do you manage that? But more important is the Indian companies have to find a ways to reduce those tariffs either by having more manufacturing here or by becoming more efficient and effective in producing those. But I think more than Indian goods, this also impacts global supply chain, where you have building complex products, where you pick up a piece of product from Japan, move it to India, add components to it, then move it to US. So I think this will be disruptive initially, but as time goes by, we will find ways to settle this thing so at least the supply chain gets much more efficient.
And do you think that India can take advantage of the vacuum created in the US after Chinese firms and Chinese exports have been restricted from entering the United States?
Well, when you look at, you have 60% tariff on China and the goods coming out of China and 20%. So you have a 40% variance. And so that makes it a little more, it gives more incentive to US companies to look at India. But beyond that, India also becomes a market opportunity for US companies. Apple is a classic case which moved part of its manufacturing to India. And today, 25% of the Apple iPhone 16s are getting manufactured in India. But at the same time, Apple also went into the domestic market selling its iPhone, and its domestic sales in India has crossed over $5 billion. So there are not too many markets out there which can provide scalable skills and at the same time growing market, which is India itself.
Mukesh, do you think that Trump's strong stance on illegal immigration will impact Indians wanting to live and work in the United States? Do you expect a cut in H-1B visas being granted to Indian professionals?
Yeah. So I think you have to understand illegal immigration is a big issue. In fact, we have around 16 million illegal staying in the country itself. And the third largest illegal migrating into the US are Indians itself. So that does have an impact on the relationship because Trump administration is going to ask Indian government to see how they can also curb that illegal immigration coming in. So I think it's going to be basically a closing of the border, but at the same time asking government to also curtail outflow from the countries coming into the US if they're not legal itself. Now, in regards to H-1B, you have to understand that the legal immigration is impacted by illegal immigration. And so I think it's important while you try to stop illegal, you have to make the legal one much more efficient. And hopefully, both side of the parties, Democratic and Republican, will come together and solve this one out. H-1B is critical for US companies because they use talent coming out of India and other countries to basically fill the gap which they can't find workers in the US. And these workers are hardworking, they're intelligent, they're very efficient. And so I think H-1B plays a very, very critical role. I think we need a reform agenda there because what happens is a lot of H-1B, if they want to stay behind, especially Indians, the waiting time on the green card it goes into decades. And I think that's not fair. So the quota system on H-1B to green card also has to be looked into it. So I think you will see major reforms coming on the legal immigration side as the Trump administration start taking shape place effective January 20th, 2025.
And also, Mukesh, how do you think Donald Trump will stop the Ukraine-Russia war? Will Trump cut funding to NATO and military aid to Ukraine? What will be the impact then?
Well, you have to understand, you have a leader who believes that the foreign wars are not in the interest of United States. You have a leader who basically is averse to wars itself, and he feels that billions of dollars of aid going to Ukraine is waste of resources. So I think you will see some kind of effort on part of President Trump to stop the flow of aid going to Ukraine, and that's going to put pressure on Ukraine and Russia to come to some kind of understanding and stop killing each other. As far as NATO goes, you have to understand he made the same threat in his first administration, and the impact was while NATO stood still, the defense spending of countries which are required to be 2% of the GDP went up. So I think he is going to put pressure on NATO to start taking ownership and responsibility on the budget aspect of their contribution, because he strongly feels that it is not US job to fund NATO itself. It is NATO's job to fund the European countries to fund themselves from a defense spending perspective. So I think you will see some kind of a stress point coming on NATO. Will that be abrogated? My opinion is no, it will not, because I think NATO is critical to deal with a common front to expansionist Russia itself.
And Trump has backed India's push for IMEEC trade corridor as well. How do you look at that support?
Well, the IMEEC corridor was launched during the G20 in India, and $20 billion was budgeted for that. It's a corridor from India all the way down to Europe. It's the old Silk Route, and it kind of counter the China's BRT initiative itself. So you have to understand that this is not just a physical corridor. It will be a digital corridor. It will be a supply chain corridor. It will be a skills corridor. It could be the food supply chain aspect of the corridor itself. It provides tremendous opportunity to Indian companies, to Middle Eastern companies, European companies, and American companies to collaborate. And for example, as time goes by, there will be a tremendous opportunity for a lot of the companies from the region to go rebuild Gaza whenever things settle down. There's a tremendous opportunity for Indian companies to explore providing infrastructure, providing digital technology, providing IT technology to that build-up of Gaza itself. But more important is I think IMEC provides a tremendous opportunity, business opportunity, and I think both America, Saudis, German, French, UAE, and Indians are quite keen to take this forward.
And Mukesh, do you think that will Trump rope in Indian Americans in high-level cabinet positions? Kash Patel, Vivek Ramaswamy, all important people for him.
Well, you have to understand when you have a transition of government, roughly 4,500 political appointees are positioned, and so that process will continue from cabinet level to mid-level bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. And when you look at the Biden administration, you have roughly around over 150 Indian Americans who were part of the administration. And I see the same trend taking place in the Trump administration also. How many will go in the cabinet is hard to tell because there'll be a lot of people jockeying for a limited cabinet position. Will there be some Indian American? Absolutely. The question is how many, we don't know yet, but you will see a large number of Indian Americans playing a pivotal role in the Trump administration.
Right. How do you view Indian Americans' shift from traditionally supporting Democrats to voting for Donald Trump? That's a big shift.
So what we saw was that the vote was split in the sense is the women Indian Americans voted much higher number for Kamala Harris, and male Indian Americans voted much higher number for Donald Trump. Traditionally, yes, they have voted Democrats, but what has happened is you have to understand the Indian Americans typically tend to be fiscally conservative, and socially they are much more, I would say, democratic. And so you have to see the policy aspect, and that's how they swung the vote in favor of Donald Trump. And in some states like Arizona, Colorado, and also in Texas, they played a pivotal role, basically being the swing votes between Democrats and Republicans, because they make roughly around 2.6 million votes across the U.S. But more important is they're the most affluent minority group, earning twice the average income of an average American itself, and politically contributing substantial number of donations. So I think they were quite effective and influential both in the campaign part and also in the voting part.
Mukesh, appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much for taking out the time and speaking with us.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.